Well, I hope you had a great weekend. Mother's Day is always a special time at our house, and I hope it was for you. And hope you had a good time with your family. And if you were able to be with your mom, I do hope that was a special time for you. I know it was for me. And also, today's Monday, and we're still celebrating the Mavericks' incredible sweep of the Lakers. Oh my goodness, it was awesome. And sorry to any of you Laker fans, but it was just kind of a cathartic, cleansing thing for us to finally take the Lakers out and to sweep them, no less. So anyway, we had a great day watching all that. Well, since I have filmed this video, lots of things that happened in the world. Obviously, I guess the biggest news was Osama bin Laden being killed, and just what that represents for the future of terrorism and Al-Qaeda and who knows what else. I know that was kind of a monumental event. It's been on everybody's minds. And then we made our way through to the weekend, and as a church, of course, we celebrated Mother's Day, and that's always a huge day for us. And big sports weekend here in the Metroplex. Had the Lakers and the Yankees in town at the same time. We pretty much disposed of the Lakers. Yankees not so much, but anyway, it's a long season. We'll see what happens with our Rangers. But this week in our daily Bible readings, we're going to be reading several selections from the book of Deuteronomy. And what I want you to just be looking for is this covenant relationship that God chose to have with His people. He decided that He wanted Israel to respond to Him in obedience. And so you're going to be hearing a lot of that in your readings this week, where God is going to say, choose this way, choose to obey. There are consequences for disobedience. We already know that, I hope, that there are consequences when we choose to disobey. Probably the best earthly relationship that helps us understand that is when we're children, the relationship we have with our parents. Disobedience in my house was something that usually was addressed pretty quickly, and I would say most effectively. My dad was, many of you knew him, he was pretty much old school when it came to that kind of stuff. I can remember one example. My best friend lived right across the street from me when we were growing up, and my dad and his dad were in cahoots with one another. You know, they basically had the rights to discipline either one of us, and when I was a kid that seemed really unfair to me, but now as a dad I think it's a great idea. But we both knew that we could play ball in our backyards. That was fine. We had the freedom to do that, but there were certain things we couldn't do. For example, we could play pitch and catch, and we could play wiffle ball in the backyards, both my house and his house, but you couldn't take an actual baseball bat with a real baseball and take batting practice in the backyard. That was specifically forbidden, his yard and my yard. Well, one day we were at his house, and we were playing, just having a good time, and Mark decided he'd get his bat out there, which was fine. We played a little bit of pepper. For those of you that are familiar with baseball, that means that you just have a bat in your hand, you just barely hit the ball back to the person that's tossing it to you. And so we were doing that. Well, Mark's dad was sitting in the kitchen, and he was watching us, and so he knew what we were doing, so it wasn't that big a deal. Well, then Mark decided, he said, of course it was his fault, not mine. So often that's been the case for me. But anyway, Mark said, why don't you just start throwing the ball a little bit harder? And I said, hey man, I don't think we're supposed to do that. He said, oh, come on, don't worry about it, it's not that big a deal. And I said, okay, so I reared back, I threw one pretty good clip, and he swung and missed, and so it wasn't that big a deal. Then I threw the next one, and when I did, he was batting right hand. His dad was right over here in the kitchen, and there was a storm glass door that was between us and him, and Mark hit the ball, and he fouled it. And Mr. Hobbs had just raised the glass on that door to let air in through the screen, and the ball went through both panes of that glass door. And like any good Christian boy, I just threw my glove down and took off running home because I was so scared of what Mr. Hobbs was going to do to me. And I found out later, after my dad got a hold of me, I'd been better off to let Mr. Hobbs take care of me rather than after he called my dad and let him know what we had done. So our disobedience was pretty quickly addressed, but then we were left with the cleanup. So Mr. Hobbs made me come back over there with Mark, and I had to help clean up and had to go with him, and he had to purchase new windows for that door, and he had to just watch us. I had to watch him go through all of that just because we made that snap decision to be disobedient. And my dad was in on all of that, requiring me to do all of that with him. Well, you know, when our relationship with God it may seem like that our disobedience is not addressed just like that. That may seem like that's the way it is for us. And sometimes that's probably the case. As God is very patient, as He watches us and He allows us the freedom to make decisions for ourselves. But the truth of the matter is that our disobedience ultimately is going to cause damage, kind of like a ball going through a double pane glass storm door. And then there's going to be the residual damage of what's occurred from that decision that we've made. And then there's got to be the cleanup and the aftermath of decisions that we make that are disobedient and rebellious decisions. And so it's really that way in our spiritual life. And God is telling Israel in these passages that you're going to be reading this week, I want you to be obedient to me. Because if you're going to be disobedient, there's going to be a lot of glass laying around. There's going to be a lot of residual effect, and there's going to be a time for recovery, and there's going to be judgment. Well, God does bring that kind of judgment in our lives when we're disobedient to Him. But by the same token, He loves us. He cares about us. He's in a covenant relationship with us today under the new covenant, and He wants to bless us. And one of the ways that we receive the blessing of God is by being obedient to Him. It's in the obedience itself that we're actually blessed. So this week in your readings, just pay attention to how God speaks powerfully through Moses. It addresses our family relationships. We're supposed to teach our children. It addresses our social relationships. And obviously, ultimately, it's connected to our relationship with God. So I hope this week will be a meaningful week for you as you learn these powerful lessons about disobedience and obedience.